We're just starting this. We have tried kind of at, well, I think they were in November and December, and we never got enough people. And of course, the reason for it was people were unaware of it. We tried to do it too soon. These that we have now, we have 4 of them, and the first one is going to occur in February. They're all Saturdays, and they're all day trips. The first one, on February 10th, is the Fabergé exhibit and winter tour. I think that you will be very pleased with this particular tour. I understand the Fabergé egg exhibit is quite nice. And if you remember, about 2 years ago, I think we had a program where someone talked to us about the Fabergé eggs and how they were made and so forth. So you may want to try and take that one in. The next one is in March 31st, and that's the Bucks County tour. It's the one that we were trying to do earlier this year. We will be going to the Perry Mansion in New Hope, which is the home of the New Hope Historical Society. There'll be some brief shopping in New Hope, which includes lunch, and a tour of Pearl S. Buck home. So that's another nice tour, I think. We're going to have, I won't go into the descriptions of them. Everyone should have gotten one of these in their newsletter. We have a New York City historical tour, which I think will be quite interesting, and a Cumberland, Maryland historical tour. So think about it. We have to get at least, I would say, about 38 to 40 people to go. So if you like to take trips like that, we sure would like if you would go with us. If you have any questions on them, I don't have all the answers yet, but in the next week or so I should be able to get all the answers, all the things that you need to know. Is there anyone else who wants to make any announcements? And I forgot to say the Pledge to Allegiance, so let's stand now and do that.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And again, we'll have our raffle following our program, and we will have refreshments for you afterwards. So please stay and socialize after the program is over. I'd like to have our Vice President Bunny introduce our speaker now.
Get this a closer. Can you hear me? Can you hear through the microphone? Thank you, Kathy. It is my pleasure this evening to introduce a resident of Hershey for 50 years. He and his family have been here for that time. Our guest speaker is Mr. Joseph Gould. Mr. Gould has been retired from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania since 1987 in the Department of Agriculture. And he was a Dickinson graduate in '49. And he was also past president of the Toastmasters of Harrisburg and Hershey. And he is a Hummelstown Rotarian. Mr. Gould has a family here. His oldest daughter I went to school with, so I've known the family for a long time myself. Please help me welcome Mr. Gould.
That's better. Yeah. Okay. privilege to be here this evening. I want to thank the Derry Township Historical Society for inviting me here. And great to see so many people in this auditorium. There's a French proverb which says, you can't make love through an upstairs window. You must come down. Well, you can't get the problem through if you don't express yourself properly. In Hebrews number 9, it says, look to the past as God speaks to Zechariah. We know the future, we know the present, we know the past, but we don't know the future. I don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now, but I do know one thing that's going to happen within the next 10 years. We're going to have hydrogen power units in our home and our cars. This experimentation has been going on in Baltimore, Arizona, and California for 5 years, and they expect it to happen within 10 years, as soon as they can get the price to reach our pocketbook. But the future is so difficult to project. The only thing we know is the past, what happened yesterday. We don't even know what's going on today. You don't know if this speech is going to be any good tonight. Now, I want to talk about 3 things tonight. First, life in early Derry, 1730 to 1794. George Washington's trip through here in 1794, October the 2nd. And the third thing is the so what. So what do we do about it? Life in, I walk away in case you can't hear. Life in Derry in 1730 was nondescript. The agricultural situation was such that it was the fruited plains we speak of in the America the Beautiful. This was the fruited plains. We had so darn cotton-picking many fruit trees around here. Apple, pear, peach, and a few apricots. That's about it. But that was the consortium, the makeup of the land at that time. I want to give you my bibliography. I forgot about that. It's taken, my bibliography comes from the Dauphin County Historical Society, and my collectio is my college Dickinson, Professor Winfred Bell, his name is. He was a professor that Ira Reed and I had, Pastor Ira Reed of the First Presbyterian Church, and we contacted him after we both moved to Hershey. Here are and Ira and I spent many times with Bell going over the history of this great locale and the history of George Washington. But 1963, I had an unfortunate accident. I fell out of a tree and broke an arm and leg. So I spent 15 days out here at the old Hershey Hospital, and Ira Reed came to see me, and he brought 3 books from the Dauphin County Historical Society with him, and also some church records from the Derry Presbyterian Record. And that started me on a mission. I became an avid reader of Dauphin County historical accounts, particularly in Derry, through the efforts of my friend Ira Reed. And he and I talked many, many hours about the problems that existed here and the good things that existed here at that time. One of the things was the industry. The industry was liquor. 5 stills were here. 3 made whiskey and 2 made brandy. They didn't make brandy out of grapes because we had no grapes. There were no grapes in the whole area. They made it out of fruit tree products. Calvados, which came from apples. Eau de vie, which came from plums. The eau de vie today comes from France. It's made out of figs. And from Oregon, it's made out of plums out there. And they made peach brandy and apricot brandy. Then they made 3 types of rye and Scotch. Because the makeup at that time was Scotch-Irish and French. We had a lot of Frenchmen here who were barrel makers. They were called coopers. The Scotch-Irish brought them in to help them with their liquor industry. They had to have people making oak barrels, so the French were the ones who were the coopers. Then we had Germans who were dairy farmers, and they grew the wheat and the rye to make the whiskey. So you had 5 different stills, and we saw evidence of them. Ira and I went out along Route 743 one day to Harry Goodman's cabin along the Swan Arrow Creek there. He was the first cabin on the right-hand side there. It's since burned down. They're all gone now, all 6 of them, all cabins. But outside of Harry's place was an oak tree, a huge oak tree, and up in the oak tree, 30-some feet high, was a cradle. They used to haul up the oak barrels with the liquor in there and put the oak barrels of liquor in the cradles, and the wind would sway the barrels back and forth, and thus eliminating the fusel oil which was in the liquor. The fusel oil then would pass through the charcoal on the inside of the barrel. And today they do the same technique, but they do the same thing with trucks. They put loosely knit barrels in a truck and move it from warehouse to warehouse to get rid of the fusel oil. And the brandy is made from distilled wine. First they had to make wine out of the fruit, then they distilled it. There was an old Italian here in town, he used to make wine, about 300 gallons of a year. But he'd always take one batch of peach wine and make peach brandy with it. And he was so worried that someone would turn him into the Internal Revenue Department. So I told him, please, I won't tell anybody. This was the tenor of the times, and we had a lot of industry in the liquor industry, and we had a lot of fruit trees going on at the time. Transportation was mostly on barges down the Swat Creek and then Manatee Creek. They brought the goods in from Lehigh Valley and up in the upper coal region, and they dropped them off at Union Deposit. Union Deposit was a big flea market on the way to Port Royal. Port Royal was Royalton, down below Middletown. That was the big port of the Susquehanna. We had no bridges, but they carried all the goods down from the flea market, or if they wouldn't sell it at the flea market, then they carried it down to Port Royal, which was Royalton, that today. And I want to talk about the church a little bit, about Ira's church. They had church services twice a month, usually 3 days at a time, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They had to have that because of the Indians. There are 5 tribes of Indians around here. The Crees, the Senecas, the Mohawks, the Lantangos, and the Senecas. I guess I did say the Senecas. There was a 5th tribe, I can't think of the name of it, the Crees. So they had to hold services mostly on the weekends to protect the people from the Indians. The first minister here was a man by the name of Smith at the Derry Township Church in 1721. They started in 1710, but they didn't get going really. They had a consortium with Donegal Presbyterian Church in Mount Joy and Paxton Church in Paxton. And the consortium was the minister would feed and serve all three. So he would go by horseback from church to church. And Derry's turn was like every other weekend or every third weekend in this area. Now something strange happened here called benign safety nets. What were benign? The historians call them benign safety nets. If you'll notice on a map in this area, you'll see 17 or 18 little towns around here. I'm trying to think of the name. It's Fontana, Shellsville, Grandville, all around here, a little town. These were built that way to protect the farmers at night. They would come in out of the fields and they would live with their families and get ready for the next day's work. But the protection would be in the cluster of the little village. Today, these little villages are still going strong, but they have no governments. Most of them are just rural villages. But that was the purpose of it. Safety nets. That's why they were built that way. And it enabled the German farmer then to produce his oats and his rye and his wheat and supply the local liquor people here in Derry. Now, if NHS hadn't come along 100 years later, if he would have come along sooner, this could be the liquor capital of the world. Really. We'll get into the second point now of Washington's trip through here in 1794. George was a character. He was born in 1732 in Fredericksburg, Virginia. He had a farm. He raised horses. He raised cotton. He raised tobacco. And he raised cane. He later on became our president. He wanted to be known as general, not as president, in 1789. He traveled with 12 bodyguards, 2 aides, and 1 groom. Now, why did he come in this way? Why did he come over through this? Because the Whisky Rebellion was on. Congress enacted a law whereby they decided to collect a tax from all the liquor people in the country. And in order to do that, Washington decided to send the troops out to collect it because they weren't paying it. They weren't giving the government the money. So he decided to send them out. Now he left Valley Forge in September of 1794, and he took Route 23 to Churchtown, then into Blue Ball, and then up into Schaeferstown. He stayed overnight at Franklin Hotel there, the Franklin House. Then he decided to come up into Lebanon, and he stayed overnight at Lebanon because of a Masonic meeting at the Washington Hotel. There were no hotels in Derry, so he couldn't stay in Derry. But he stopped as he went through here to use the facilities over at the Presbyterian Church. He was a great tea drinker. And he had to stop. So his next stop was over in Homelstown. There were no hotels in Derry. There were no hotels in Homelstown. There were bed and breakfast comfort inns. But he decided that he didn't want to stay in Homelstown. He wanted to go on to Harrisburg, where he had 3 more Masonic meetings. So 4 of his men stayed at Al Green's pool hall over in the main street of Homelstown. And they stayed there to get their horses shod and fixed up for the next day. But he went on into Harrisburg, but he wouldn't use the turnpike, because the turnpike was a toll. You had to pay 11 cents. 11-cent toll at that time. All of Route 422 was a toll turnpike from Chester to Harrisburg. Every 30 miles you had a toll house, a log cabin toll house. Last week they uncovered a toll house in Everett. A man was tearing his house down. He found out that the one end of his house was a toll house. Never knew it. So they're going to preserve that and move it. But Washington wouldn't pay, so he went on into Harrisburg. Stayed 3 nights. There were 3 different lodges there, and he gave speeches at 3 different lodges in Harrisburg. Now there's no bridges, so he had to cross the river up at Fort Hunter on a barge. And the whole purpose of this trip was to review the troops. The troops were coming up Route 30. While he went along with his men, it's 15 men, the other way, the more circuitous way, into Harrisburg. The whole purpose was to review the troops in Carlisle at Denny Hall on October the 6th, 1794. He reviewed the troops there on their way out to Bedford. Now, he followed the troops out to Bedford and reviewed them the second time. There were 6,000 troops involved there. Their purpose was to go out there and seek out the revenues who had fled and wouldn't pay the tax. The ones here all fled, all the Scotch-Irish left. And the French, they were gone. The French went out to fight the French and Indian War out near Fort Ligonier and Fort Latrobe and Fort Pitt. They were all out there. The Indians all went down to Chesapeake area. They needed more fish and more hunting grounds down there. So this place was kind of void for a while until the Germans moved in. The Germans came in from Lehigh Valley, and with them they brought not their whiskey, but their beer. They set up 30 breweries around here. None in Hershey, none in Derry, because we didn't have the water. Water was always a big problem here. Mr. Hershey knew it too. Water was a big problem in Hershey. We didn't have any deep wells. We had shallow well water, but not deep well water. So you had breweries set up in Harrisburg, York, and Lancaster, and a few in Lebanon. And some in Pottsville too. Pottsville has some good breweries. Then Washington reviewed the troops the second time in Bedford, and they went on into the hills to root out the revenuers who weren't paying their taxes. But the revenuers were smart, because the Whisky Rebellion was a bust. They didn't collect the taxes. The revenuers went on into Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky. And instead of making rye whiskey and Scotch whiskey, they now became bourbon manufacturers, because they found a new tool they could use with corn. So the revenuers benefited from the Whisky Rebellion, and the government lost their shirt. All they did was got a big ride for the troops and a ride for Washington. Now, so what? What does this mean? What are we talking about? Dreams that Washington had. He had dreams. He said you should season your life with variety and create something. He was a great philosopher, Washington. He believed in the precepts of good Christian management. He said you create beauty where there is darkness. These are all quotes from Washington. You create excellence where there is mediocrity. You create excitement where there is only a ho-hum attitude. And history is a mix of moments, Washington said. When he was president, he was the capital was New York City. He lived in Morristown, New Jersey. We see pictures of him crossing the Delaware. Heavens, he crossed the Delaware 30 times, going back and forth. He had a home in Germantown, he had one in Valley Forge, then he moved to Mount Vernon. And believe it or not, the last 2 years of his life, he made whiskey. You ever hear the Mount Vernon distillery? That was his. He made $7,000 the second year in business. Then he died. I think he died from making his whiskey. But never stop dreaming your dream, as Washington said. Put a little excitement in your life. Let's remember Washington as a symbol of our democracy. And let's remember the early times of Derry as a symbol of greatness for things to come. And light up the lights of today tell us about the lights of tomorrow. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Does anybody have any questions about Derry Church or Derry or George Washington? Nobody have any questions?
Nobody has any questions.
Okay.
Well, you'll be here, and they can ask you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much. There's a little token of our
Okay,
appreciation.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was great. You have a sense of humor, Mr. Gould. That was really great. I like your sense of humor, yes. Well, this is not the end of our program this evening, folks. You know, Christmas time is a wonderful time for music.